The Justice Beat is dedicated to the 1 in 3 Americans touched by incarceration. The Justice Beat is where we discuss all things justice.
Today's topic, redeeming the time, the urgency of not giving up. Jeremiah J.J. Bourgeois. In 1992, at age 14, J.J. became one of the youngest children sentenced to life without parole in U.S. history. While confined, J.J. dedicated himself to learning the law and understanding public policy. In time, he published multiple articles in law journals, became the only prisoner ever admitted to Scribes, the American Society of Legal Writers, was cited as authority by an intermediate appellate court in Washington state, and became a journalist featured in online sites that provide independent news and commentary.
Good morning, Justice Beat family, and welcome to our family on Real STL News, as well as on our new family joining us on Twitch. Thank you so much for joining us once again for another episode of the Justice Beat Talk Show. And this morning we have joining with us is Mr. Jeremiah Bourgeois, who goes by JJ. Good morning. Good morning, JJ.
Hey,
how you doing?
Good morning. It's great to be here.
All right. Great to have you. Great to have you. I'm very, very excited. And I'm glad that we had an opportunity to connect beforehand on yesterday because I got a chance to kind of really feel out some of your passions. And as we talked yesterday, we're going to really connect on a couple of things regarding juveniles and those specifically experiencing life without parole sentences. So today we're going to be talking with JJ about his experience as a juvenile in the juvenile justice system who was sentenced to life without parole. So JJ, talk to me a little bit about your background story. How did you come into contact with the system?
You know, I came into contact with the system before we'd ever heard of school to prison pipelines, but that was exactly what I was going through. I started off when I was a kid going to Catholic school, two-parent home, but that did not inoculate me from adverse childhood experiences. And when I started acting out about in the 6th grade, rather than call a parent or somebody to look after you and keep you out of that system, they were calling 911. And I found myself having contact with the police for situations, whether it was a fight between two kids and both of us get charged with assault, or there were just myriad ways that ultimately led me to become in contact with the system. But it was delinquency, and it was a whole lot of interventions that the only implement they utilized was the police and juvenile court judges.
About what age did this occur?
This all started about age 11 to 12.
It's like 4th, 5th grade, 5th, 6th grade?
Yeah, 6th grade, 6th grade. And, you know, once you start having those contacts with the police, it was quite easy for me to be seen as a criminal rather than a kid who needed some counseling.
Okay. You know, as you were talking, I'm thinking about the incident that occurred about maybe 4 or 5 days ago in Maryland, where a 5-year-old walked out of the school and the police were called. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not, but it's no surprise.
Okay. So I'd like to set it up. What I would say is the one thing that was most disturbing about the situation was the way the officers handled the situation. When they encountered the kid on the street, he actually had walked out of the school, was walking down the street. There was a officer, matter of fact, African-American officer, who approached the 5-year-old. One thing that I noticed was that the 5-year-old didn't appear to be verbal.
Yeah.
When asked questions and asked to explain why he left the school, he never communicated anything audible. And they missed that. Even when they got him back to the school, there was a resource officer, the regular police officer, and then a teacher. And they continued to all kind of berate him, correct him, chastise him. And the child never uttered an audible word to either try to explain himself or to communicate what was wrong. And that told me that there had to have been some type of perhaps developmental disability, a language delay, the inability to express.
That's what through your eyes, I'm sure through their eyes, he was just a stubborn kid who thought he don't need to tell us and answer our questions. Yeah, he was the unruly slave. That's what he was, with the attitude.
And that's how they treated the child. So I wanted to bring that up. If somebody on the team could maybe pull up that video, see if you can find that video on YouTube from about 5 days ago. It was an incident in Maryland involving a 5-year-old who walked out of the school. It's within the last week. So Jeremiah, JJ, at that age, what was happening in terms of your support system? When you were having those challenges, what was your family's response to the situation? And the reason why I ask that question is a lot of time family members I have found tend to side with the school and they're missing, which tells me they're missing something at home in the child, as opposed to asking the questions of why, what's causing the behavior. What was your experience like in terms of family intervention and responses from the school? I mean, I need to understand this.
I think I can just give you a short story that puts it all in perspective. I went to a middle school, Denny Middle School in Seattle, and I was suspended for a couple days from school. And so, all your friends are at school. You ain't got no access to your friends. So I showed up at the school like 20 minutes before school ended, before that bell rung. And somebody had called the police because as I'm walking past the front of the school again, I see an officer inside the school administrative office, and I see the finger point towards me like that one. And another officer is in front of the school in his car, and he got out and he confronted me and he said, what are you doing out here? I said, I'm waiting for my friends. Well, why ain't you in school? I got suspended. Well, if you're suspended from school, what are you doing here? Now, I was smart. I was always smart when I was young. Okay. And I said, I answered your question. I'm here waiting for my friends. And he asked a follow-up question. And I said, this conversation's over. That man snatched me up by my neck so fast, threw me on that police car. Mind you, I'm about 100 pounds.
Right.
And put his finger in my face and said, I'm in control here, not you. And it ended up with him slamming me on the concrete in front of the school with the vice principal watching. And I got thrown in the back of that police car. And the brother, ironically, looked at me. There's a black police there too. That came out. And he said to me, "You the ones that make me ashamed to be black." And when I got home, I went to the Juvenile Detention Center. They sent me home and I told my mom this story. She didn't do nothing because by that time, with all of those unnecessary police interventions, it was easy for her to presume he must be lying. What did this boy really do? There ain't no reason he would be getting arrested and having all this contact with these police. And it's the system that implanted the idea that there was actually something inherently wrong with me, or that I was just acting out, as opposed to these people are crazy. Why are they calling the police on your boy all the time? Why are they treating the school as if it's a mini prison and having police and cameras and scanners, and what is going on here? And so she was not immune to the narrative that I was a budding little criminal, because the system was responding in a way that built that fiction. And I mean, unfortunately, until it was too late, the only thing she was able to advocate for was, please keep them locked up. I don't want them to get killed in these streets. Do something. Give them something. And the answers from countless juvenile court judges was, he hasn't done nothing serious enough for us to provide the resources to intervene. And then when I did something serious enough, the intervention was a life without parole sentence.
Okay. Okay. So what I even envision, okay, because I don't want to come down on anyone in particular in terms of, especially like parents. But what I do recognize is sometimes parents just don't have the educational awareness and background on how to seek out resources, alternatives, where to go. Okay. And there are a lot of parents that are like that, especially when you come from perhaps single parent families, where you have a mom working multiple jobs or may have several kids, etc. Okay, so I want to give benefit of the doubt. That is what I have seen there, that there's a lot of struggle in that area. In relation to you as a young person, what was going on with you? When you look back and reflect, and then we'll go forward and talk about your time, okay, in the system. What was going on with you? What was causing the anger, the angst, the rebellion? Have you pinpointed it?
I did. It was coupled to two things. First, it was my father, after our divorce, essentially pitting us against our mother, created a fiction as to how he was kicked out and she got rid of him, and made us resent my mom, so that everything she tried to do, we looked at through this warped view, like this is more of that stuff. Every weekend he would be talking about her whenever we went on our outings. And as far as interventions, my mom tried a lot. She tried parental support groups. We had insurance that was enabled us to be sent to this at-risk youth home. And this place had everything you wish the system had. And I was the only brother there besides my sister and brother. We're no black folks. This place cost money, and the insurance eventually stopped paying, but she was trying everything. But there was also an element of supervisory neglect. She worked all the time. And I subsequently came to learn that supervisory neglect is even worse than physical. And didn't have enough supervision. My brother was being abused by my grandmother, and he was abusing me in return, my older brother. And, if there's three things as far as home life, it was that abuse that my brother endured that passed on to me. It was my father pitting his children against the mother post-divorce. And it was the lack of supervision by the mother, who was doing everything she could, but just didn't realize that having a close enough eye on these kids is just as important as ensuring their financial stability.
Okay. That's great insight. And I'm glad that you did the work in terms of identifying and pinpointing the root causes. And that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot for young people to carry around the angst and the division between parents, a mom who's having to work a lot, abuse, and a lot of that amounts to unaddressed trauma.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move forward. We've identified, you've had an opportunity to reflect and look back, but I want to get this story. What happened? Because there's a place here that caused you to do that kind of reflection. So let's move forward to your time in the system. What brought you to the system?
Ultimately, I ran away from home when I was about 13. My brother was living on the streets. He had ran away a couple months before. And, this was the crack era. Anybody who hits them streets and needs to hustle to try to make it, it was an open door to the game back then. And that's exactly what I started doing with my brother, under the tutelage and mentorship of cats who were a lot older. And, I took everything they said seriously, whether it's bust somebody upside the head for something that I can look back now as being completely unnecessary and even psychopathic. It made perfect sense back then. And ultimately, my brother got in an argument with some convenience store owners, and him and a friend opened fire on him at the close of business. And months later, after they were convicted, or my brother was convicted, within a few hours, I was at that same store opening fire. And, looking back, the sad irony, if irony is even a word to use in this context, is the victims were essentially no different than we were. They were Black folks. They were East Africans like my mother. My mother's from Uganda. They were from a country next door. They all had the same dreams of trying to get to this country and make a living and provide a better life for their family. And one of those immigrants ended up being killed and the family destroyed. And the son of another one ends up in prison for the rest of his life. And his family's destroyed. And, the collateral consequences and victimization, it goes both ways when it comes to this system. There's very few mechanisms to actually try to bring healing to anybody.
Wow. Okay. That's you captured that beautifully, because when you mention collateral consequences, I wonder, do people really think about that? Typically, when we look at incidences that occur, we look at just that particular situation, but then there's the fallout of the indirect impact on families. So now you've got a mom that was working hard, trying to provide you guys with the things that you need. And now this happens.
And now I'm in a courtroom facing life without parole. And, you asked about at what point all of this came to me, as far as being able to identify the different points that got me off of a positive trajectory.
Right.
And, it didn't come to me until a few years before I was finally paroled. There was a mitigation specialist working on my case in trying to identify all these different factors that might have led me to prison.
Right.
And I remember when I first met her, she asked me about my life. And I said, I went to Catholic school for a long time. We were involved in extracurricular activities, ballet, tap dancing. Brother was playing sports. It was really, kind of like the Cosbys or something.
You know what? You're reading my mind. I was thinking Cosby-esque, right?
Cosby-esque was the exact phrase I use. And she said to me, I can assure you, you did not get to where you are if that was the right picture of what was going on. And she was absolutely right. And in 49 pages, she painted a picture of what was really going on. And it put so much in context. But what that demonstrated for me is, even with age and insight, it's hard to really pin down what was the issue.
Yes.
You might get close to it. You might skirt near it, but actually being able to point and say things like supervisory neglect and have a list of adverse childhood experience sheets and be able to just, did this happen? Did that happen? Did that happen? And, you know, it's no matter how much reflection you do in there, it's difficult when you're looking at your own life to be able to be truly accurate about what factors truly led to you being where you are today. And I think that's with any life. It's just that when it comes to the criminal justice system, it's even more important for us to try to figure out what was going on, especially when so many of those factors result from benign neglect of the system or always trying to use crime and justice as the means to solve social problems.
I want to make sure I heard you correctly. Did you say it wasn't until after you got out?
No, this was right before I got out.
Right before you got out. Okay, so
yeah,
okay,
about 2 years before. And now, go ahead.
You did how many years?
I did 27.
27, right?
And some change, yeah.
Now that's amazing to me that, and you went in at what age? Was it 14?
14.
Okay, so from 14 until you said a few years before, so let's give it 25. So let's say
25 years.
30. So at 39 was the first time that you really did a deep dive?
No, at 39, by 39, I knew that what my father had done contributed it to me being confined.
Okay.
But I never saw that, notwithstanding all of my mom's efforts, there was supervisory neglect going on.
Okay.
I didn't understand that my brother's abuse of me was actually the result of him being abused by my grandmother. I wasn't able to take it these further steps, even though I knew my character was malformed by what I was experiencing by my brother. I didn't realize that there's a reason he was doing that. Yeah.
There's always a causation, okay?
Always a cause.
But most people get hung up on the external or outward presentation of behavior. But behind that, there's always a reason. But I don't think many people want to explore causation, because then you'd have to pinpoint the person, right?
Yeah.
So so let's talk about, we got time. Let's talk about inside. So let's go back. You've gotten to the place where you identified things, but I want to go back. What was your experience as a 14-year-old in the system? Can you talk us through this? Because right now we have a lot of systems who are supposed to be given second hooks, second chances to juveniles who have life without parole sentences, which is very much needed. And it's not happening. People are fighting that. So let's talk about your experience.
You know, my experience in there, you got to survive. And that's what my mind was solely focused on. I didn't really have any concept of the court process or what was going on through all that. What ultimate outcomes could happen in different scenarios, whether it's appeals or anything else. My mind was focused on don't get punked, don't get raped, don't get extorted. And early on in the system, another young kid that I was in there with, he ends up getting raped. And I said to myself, I am never about to let this happen to me. And I committed myself to being a goon and creating the impression amongst anyone who might think of taking advantage of me that there will be serious, violent responses if I try this one. It was a deterrent. But what's funny, you talk about second chances and second looks. I was denied parole the first time for the very things that I had to do to keep me from being raped or extorted or abused. And but for the fact that I'd been confined over about a quarter century by the time these decisions from the court started coming out about second looks, all you would have had was that first decade of my behavior based on this young man is trying to survive unmolested in prison. And decision makers would have looked at me 10 years into my sentence and said, he's one of the incorrigible ones. Because I've seen this happening over and over. The very thing somebody is doing to survive before the age of 25 being utilized as a basis to say they'll never be reformed. Yet here I am. I was one of them. And the difference between me and a lot of these people who are being denied that second chance is the law changed by the time I was able to mature and demonstrate that I wasn't who they thought I was, that caricature of super predator or violent criminal. But these young men and women who had to spend that first 10 years doing the same thing and ended up in a courtroom soon thereafter, I'm seeing them being denied over and over again.
Okay, so again, so you're talking about the culture of the system that is allowed to be. The culture within either the adult system or the juvenile system breeds that kind of behavior.
Yes.
It is a contributing factor, as you said, to why a lot of folks are being denied. And again, that's, I don't know if there has been a lot of writing about that in terms of the denials and what's causing the denials, but more importantly, what young people have to go through to protect themselves when they go to facilities at an early age like that. The first thing that always crosses my mind is, Lord, don't let them be raped.
And it happens.
Because that alters a person, especially when it's same gender. So we need to hold these systems accountable for the culture that they allow to thrive in these places. Because you're right. You had to figure out what type of persona am I going to embrace in order to make it inside. And then they turn around and use that against you.
They used it against me 25 years later. So I don't know how anyone who hadn't been locked up as long as that before they finally reached a decision maker with the power to let them out. I can't see how they would fare. Actually, I know what would happen. They would be denied, and it would be claimed that they'll never change because they cited that as a basis to deny me parole after 25 years in prison, notwithstanding the fact that I was on the cusp of earning my undergraduate degree with honors. I was a journalist writing a monthly column. I had been publishing scholarly articles. I had been mentoring. They relied on, during his first 7 years of incarceration, he has a history of violence.
Did they allow you to explain it all, what was going on?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they let me explain everything. And
it didn't, and it had no impact.
Had no impact. Oh, if it had an impact, the impact was at least we're going to see you 2 years from now. That's the impact it had. And let me tell you, the last thing I would have ever done sitting in front of those people is explain to them that they are part of a system that breeds the very things I was doing and makes it a rational response in the environment that they've created and sustained.
Yes.
They would have said, we'll see you in 5 years. That's what they would have did.
Well, yeah. That's why you need people on the outside agitating and writing about this, because they would have held it against you. But if we can raise the information level around this and get people aware, young people are having to actually literally fight for their lives when they're that young.
Yeah.
Okay, to keep from being killed or raped by other men. And so we have to revisit this as well, because it's a contributing factor, and it also makes you wonder, with their knowledge and awareness of the type of culture that's bred in that system, whether or not they're complicit. Let's talk about complicits, them being complicit in that. They're aware, they know.
They know exactly what is going on in these places. But to endorse the notion that it's a rational response would be to take ownership of the system that they are maintaining. I work in a system that required this person to be a witness to the aftermath of another teenager's rape, who has spent 7 years in solitary confinement in total, because he did things in order not to fall victim like that other teenager.
Right.
And now, am I going to sit here and accept the fact that, my gosh, what did we put this poor kid through? Or is it going to be, my gosh, yeah, some people just don't change, man. You were violent before and you just continue to have this history of violence. It just doesn't that's how they think. And I don't know if they're programmed that way or if that's like a self-defense mechanism in order to protect one's psyche and to be able to conceive of oneself as doing justice.
All right. So you got past that. Let's talk about when you had an epiphany around getting it together, when you decided, okay, I'm going to be here for a minute. What can I do with my time while I'm here? Did you have any mentors, anybody that took you under their wing, or were you still pretty resistant? And I want to know, how did you get to the place where you are now in terms of you're currently in law school, right?
I am.
Okay. So while you were incarcerated, did you finish school? What made you decide to finish school, and what gave you this drive to push forward to continue your education along the path of law?
It was really two things. The first was when I was in solitary confinement, Mexican cat I'd known for a long time, good dude. He had won his appeal. He got about 7 years taken off his sentence, and he did it himself. And I was so shocked. I'm like, man, how did you figure this out, man? He said, man, I've just been in the law library. That was the first clue that, well, wait a minute. There's a way to try to figure this stuff out. And he said, man, what, you ain't ever went to the law library or nothing? I'm like, no. He said, well, man, what kind of school have you done? I said, man, I got a GED. And he gave me a sad look and said, homie, if I can do this, I know you can, smart as you are. That was the first time I realized people thought I was smart. And I could figure something out like this. Months later, another guy who was locked up as a kid killed himself next door to me. He got about a 70, 80-year sentence when he was 16 years old and committed suicide right next door. And I was so impacted. I said, you know what? If I don't find a way to try to have some meaning and exist in here, that's going to be me. And you know, the lane I took was trying to understand the law, because that's what got us here. Everything that had happened to my life was impacted by the law. And the only way that I would be able to operate in a bureaucracy like a correctional system was understanding policies and practices.
Mhm.
And that's what I put my mind to, man. Like, you know what? I'm about to try to figure out everything I need to know to keep these people from doing anything they want with me or people in here that I care about. And it worked. I don't know how I kept on. I think anger at seeing what they've done and what they continue to do is what just kept me focused, man. It's it was a long odyssey, but that focus, man, you can, through all that, I realized, I understood when Martin Luther King referred to righteous anger.
Mhm.
I wasn't angry at anyone in particular in there.
Mhm.
I did not fail to recognize the harm I caused. Matter of fact, I'm angry about the fact that I would be going to Juvenile and they would let me out with no interventions back into a neighborhood where guns are readily available, and a man trying to make a living for his family doesn't have any means provided by the system to protect himself or his property, or, you know what I mean? It's
Right.
not just me. There were all kind of lives destroyed and continue to get destroyed, and that makes me angry
Mm.
because I know there are things that could be done to stop it, but we have a system where there's so many decision makers where you'll have a judge tell a man who watched George Floyd get killed that he and those other bystanders ain't victims.
Right.
That's the world where we live in, where the prism can change so much depending on who they're looking at.
Mhm. You know, we had a brief discussion about that perspective, about what constitutes a victim. And that's a very dangerous perspective for a judge to have, because he holds a lot of weight and influence. People, whether they have been directly impacted or indirectly, are still victims in a way that suggests they need help as well. Trauma is not just relegated to the person who experienced the direct impact of abuse, but folks who are indirectly impacted need to also be brought into a place where their challenges are acknowledged and addressed. So yeah, you know, this is very circular. You know, this issue is very circular, but it's not looked at in a circular way. I am very intrigued by your ability to stay the course, especially as a young person, because at that age you could have gone either way. And so once you decided, based on the young brother's encouragement of you in terms of him and his viewpoint of you being very smart, brilliant, and you went forward, did you have the support? What did the educational support system look like inside?
So at the time, early in Bill Clinton's presidency, they got rid of pretty much all higher education in prison.
Mm-hmm.
No more Pell Grants, no nothing. And so by the time I tried to began taking a different track, there wasn't anything available. And I just started with writing different nonprofits who donated books to prisoners, asking them for different types of books. I tried to figure out what books do people read when they're in college? What's the mandatory books? And I just started reading textbooks and other material that I thought a college student would be reading. And a few years later, I was finally able to take correspondence courses because primarily my sister and mother and even my father. And they started paying for me to take some courses, and I would just be able to take one about every 4 months, just because of how much it cost. But those one courses every 4 months after about 10 years equaled a bachelor's degree, magna cum laude. And it's, there were a lot of people in there, man, that also could have been college graduates with honors. I just happened to have been fortunate enough to had people out there that were able to help support my transformation. But you know what's important though is I had changed before I'd ever got that degree.
Okay.
But the system is so strange. If you can't hold something up tangible that they feel is worthy and indicative of something meaningful to them, I mean, did you really change? Oh, what, you found the Lord? Show us. You can't pull something like that up. Oh, you've become a mentor. Well, did you take some mentoring course? It was because I was trying to roll out things that they deemed worthy. Oh, you write? Oh, and it's published?
Right.
Oh, that means you actually are articulate and you could demonstrate your knowledge. Well, I could have sat here and you could have figured that out. Well, no, I think you need to take a course on, that is the system. Change is only manifested through things that the change agent deems worthy. And it better be something that they offered. Because it's not possible for us to change just through self-actualization. That no, we need to change you. That's the system.
Yeah. Okay, so you've gotten your degrees, you're out. Fast forward, what was your experience like coming out? Was there any preparation on the front end for your reentry? And what has happened since you've been out?
There was a little bit of, I'm going to give, the Department of Corrections would probably identify 1 or 2 programs that they would claim prepared me for release. But no, there was no real preparation. And frankly, I think the preparation that they did do was directed at the wrong people, because in order to get out of there and paroled, they want you to have a good support system.
Right.
They want you to have people in your lives that will tell you when you're tripping, that can support you when you're struggling. And they didn't do anything to prepare any of those people for what would be released after being confined from age 14 to 42.
Right.
And so you have a traumatized man who has spent all of his adult life in prison, and you claim that you've identified people that will lower his likelihood to reoffend and increase his chances to succeed. And they did absolutely nothing to prepare any of those people for my freedom. And the fact that after less than a year and a half of freedom, the relationship I had with the woman who had been there for years supporting me ended. The fact that I'm struggling in law school and was even had housing instability for a month. The fact that I still have panic attacks. All of that is really telling of what the reentry really looked like and what was done and wasn't. And, you know, if I could be going through all this, notwithstanding the fact that it's clear that all of my dreams are coming true, I don't know what somebody else is going through when they get out of that box. And I have more understanding of why so many men and women end up right back in that place.
39 years is a long time. That's a long time. I mean, 27 years is a long time. And the work that needs to be done, which is typically referred to as family reunification around reentry. Did you and your family eventually go through any type of counseling?
No.
Not to this day.
To this day, there's been none.
Okay.
It is, people will be there and they'll do what they can. And usually when it comes to reentry, housing, a job, and transportation are the three things that one just has to have out here.
Mm-hmm.
But what about when you got that? Do you really understand when somebody explains to you, or when I explain that I'm rarely happy? What's wrong with you? Why ain't you happy? You're on. There's no knowledge or awareness of, or maybe even recognition of the trauma that place induces in people. And I also got to take some ownership over the fact of, once you develop the ability to survive in a place like that and even thrive, you struggle through whatever you're going through and just make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't even conceive for me to reach out a lot of times, or even recognize that this is something that needs to be solved.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you've been doing what you need to do to survive in a place where a cruel and unusual punishments are being imposed,
mm-hmm.
you get out here and you know what? If I made it through that, I'll make it through whatever.
But you're attempting to make it through wounded, unhealed.
That is exactly what I've been doing.
Okay. All right. Our topic is redeeming the time, the urgency of never giving up. I'm going to give you one last opportunity to kind of summarize that through your eyes of what that means to you, and then we're going to go to our Q&A. JJ, what has given you that sense of urgency to never give up? And are you still in that place?
I'm still in that place because
Okay.
even though I'm a wounded animal, I'm the director of the Beyond the Blindfold Justice Project, and I'm doing everything I can to advocate for those in this state who were teenagers,
mm-hmm.
15, 17, 19, to get them the same chance that I got. I mean, 18 and 19-year-olds in this state, it was recently ruled that they shouldn't get automatic life without parole sentences. I know some people, countless in there right now, who changed just like me,
mm-hmm.
and deserve an opportunity to be free if redemption and second chances is to mean anything. And I don't care how wounded I am or what I'm going through,
mm-hmm.
I'm going to stay using the same drive and passion that I used in there to try to get them an opportunity, man. And yeah, wounded animals are also dangerous. And that's how I look at this system. I might be wounded, but I want to still be a danger to that system, because that is a system that would look at the acts of a 15 or 16-year-old to try to survive in that place, and then use those very factors to say they should never rejoin society. It's a sick system, man. It's really sick.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We're going to move into our Q&A. Christine? Hey.
Hey. I don't actually have any questions right now on the STL news
Okay.
page.
All right, Claire.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. I don't have any questions on the page for.
Okay. Any from our production team? Okay. All right.
Actually,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question about on the website. It talks about you took, what was it? You ended the terms. Sorry, I forgot it.
Mhm.
I'm looking for it now. You took to the Washington State Court of Appeals a hearing that ended up ending the unlawful confinement of prisoners, and I'm very interested in hearing more about that.
That was actually the result of parole board policy that they put in place after they decided that those who were under 18 and got life without parole should be eligible for release. And what the law actually said was, if we're not more than likely to commit crimes, we must be released.
Mhm.
And what the parole board was doing was saying, yep, we do not believe this person is likely to reoffend. Go on and take these programs to prepare you for release over the next 18 months. And I happen to realize that, wait a minute, if it says we must be released, if we ain't likely to reoffend, that don't mean start giving us programs to prepare us for release.
Mhm.
And the law also allowed for all that preparation to be done before the hearing. But they were keeping people locked up a year and a half, 2 years longer, people being denied their release because of something that happened over those 2-year periods. And I wrote a law journal article about it, critiquing it, and it ended up being cited in another prisoner's case who was denied parole, or because of that 18 months when he got in trouble, and they got rid of the policy. The court was quoting me like I was some law professor, as opposed to sitting in a cell somewhere.
Mhm.
And I got to watch a good friend of mine be the first one to get out immediately because of what I wrote and what got
Wow.
cited. And I also got to sit in my parole hearing and see in one of the parole board members' folder that journal piece I wrote.
Mhm. Excellent. Wow. Good work. Good work. Good work.
It
All right.
was, yeah,
Go ahead.
it was satisfying. I'll tell you that.
Mhm.
And what's unfortunate is, you know, we talk about that mindset
Mhm.
that people in the system get.
Mhm.
Almost every single one of my lawyers thought it was a bad idea for me to write anything about that parole board's policy.
Mhm.
We just want to get you out.
Mhm.
You can try to burn the house down once we get you out of there, but we just want to get you out. And you know what I realized? The difference between me and them, they're lawyers and have to zealously advocate for one client. I don't want to just get me out.
Mhm.
I had a bigger view than that. I wanted out, but that don't mean I want to leave and see countless other people stay there, because after a decade of trying to learn the law in order to advocate for myself and prisoners, when the moment comes for me to utilize all those gifts that God allowed me to develop, to stay silent because I'm spooked about what they might do to me, I just didn't feel that. I wasn't with it. I wouldn't criticize anybody else who did, but I think the fact that I'm sitting here, a law student, demonstrates that I'm built a little different.
Mhm. Okay. Great. All right. One last opportunity. Anything coming in, guys? If not, we'll move on to allow JJ to have the final closing remarks. Okay. All right. So, JJ, can you let us know how to reach you, what efforts you may be working on now through your organization, and then also talk to us a little bit about your book that you have out?
So I'm the director of the Beyond the Blindfold Justice Project, and it is all about advocating for those who were confined when they were youths, to get them a second look, to get the courts to reassess their cases and make a determination as to whether they should have really got all that time based on everything we know about juvenile brain development, the very things that got me out here.
Mhm.
And it's strange to be in this position to actually be advocate for people I left behind who not so long ago I was similarly situated to. But on the other hand, I look at myself like I'm best positioned to do this. I was just there. I know these people personally. And that's what I do, man. And it is difficult work, especially being this close to that prison cell. But we all got to do what we can to try to make a change in this system, not only to give people second chances, but I think some of the very things we're talking about would increase public safety too. Mm-hmm. And, I've written about many of these things. That when I mentioned I was writing a column for a while, and they were published by the Crime Report, a collection of them. The book is called The Extraordinary Ordinary Prisoner. And you just Google my name, Jeremiah Bourgeois, and it will pop up. There's plenty out there as far as my writings and what I'm doing now. But
okay, can you repeat the name of the book again, please?
It is The Extraordinary Ordinary Prisoner. Mm-hmm. Okay. And, I think that title was apt. It was actually a title to one of my columns because, they want to look at what I did and was doing as extraordinary. No, I was an ordinary prisoner. Mm-hmm. I just had extraordinary opportunities because I had family and support out there and able to build a narrative that other folks find extraordinary. But don't think I'm any different than anybody else in there. Like, I see why he got a second chance, but the rest of them, no. I was the worst of them, according to these people. Mm-hmm. Don't flip the script now when all of a sudden you want to distinguish me from the rest of the men and women who got locked up when they were children. No. I'm just like them. I was the worst of them, according to you. So, if the worst of the worst is a law student, let's quit pretending that people don't change and can't change and don't have the capacity for it in there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, great. Well, I'm very, very excited for the road ahead for you. I love the mission and vision of your organization. And as we spoke yesterday, there are opportunities, I know, for us to be able to collaborate specifically around the youth issues. And we're going to definitely connect over the next week so that we can get you plugged in around some new initiatives that we're working on that spins off of the show.
I look forward to it.
Your insight and very candid insight and communication around the issues with the juvenile justice system and why not only redeeming the time, but also embracing a philosophy that youth, if you're going to redeem anybody, let's look at the youth. A lot of people have a jaded perspective about adults, but with young people, we need to be a little bit more embracing of the opportunities to really help them turn their lives around. They have more time in front of them than a lot of adults do. Okay. All right. So thank you so much, Justice Beat family, for joining us today for our discussion with Mr. Jeremiah Bourgeois, otherwise referred to as JJ, and our discussions around redeeming the time, the urgency of never giving up. We hope that you've enjoyed this conversation, that you've learned a little bit about the need to really embrace and support our young people on the front end before they come into contact with the system. And I just want to make sure that all of you all know that the opportunities of discussion points that we bring to you is for the betterment of all communities, and specifically communities of brown and Black individuals. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll see you next week. Same time, same place. God bless.
Thank you for listening to the Justice Beat. If you like what you heard and found the information useful, then support the Justice Beat talk show by spreading the word and telling a friend.